Okay, perfectionism and the nervous system. Are you ready for this conversation? So friends, I'm getting off of a couple of mentorship calls this week, running some groups, running a self-love container. We're almost done with our 6 weeks together. We're talking to a lot of different people, but one thing that is common is that a lot of people actually don't know that your perfectionism and your nervous system are connected like this, okay? And it is a shock and a surprise to a lot of people to discover that. It's an unknown thing for a lot of people that when your nervous system is in a state of survival, you're more likely to have perfectionistic tendencies. And when you're displaying perfectionistic tendencies, you're more likely to dysregulate your nervous system. Now, which comes first? Like, we can't say because it's like chicken or the egg and it's anybody's guess. But what we do know is nervous system regulation and perfectionism is like a circle. One thing informs the other. So the more your body, more you are feeling stressed, the more that you feel like you're not good enough, the more that you're not drawing healthy boundaries, the more that you're doubting yourself, the more that you mistrust your intuition, the more that your nervous system actually goes into a state of survival, okay? And now, state of survival, if you're not familiar, your nervous system is basically a set of nerves that determines whether or not you feel safe, whether it's in your emotional state, your mental state, your physical state, your financial state, your social state. It's always determining whether or not you feel safe. And it's a very binary system. It basically says, am I safe? Yes or no. There's like no in between with your nervous system. And so if it decides that it's not safe, it's going to put you into a survival state. Okay. Survival state, there's 5, but for the sake of this conversation, fight, flight, freeze. Okay, these are the 3 survival states that you'll default to when your nervous system is triggered. So in terms of what perfectionism does in your nervous system is that when you're feeling like you are not good enough, you're experiencing the imposter syndrome, you're feeling like, you know, you're doubting yourself, your body goes into this state of shock. It is experiencing chronic stress. It's feeling like the adrenal glands are likely to be very activated. Your digestion is compromised. Your immunity is compromised. There's a bunch of hot mess stuff that's happening when your body's in this chronic stress. And we know this from studies of the nervous system. But perfectionistic tendencies actually elevate a lot of the symptoms of a stressed out nervous system. So it actually behaves like it's in a survival mode. Even when you're like going through your day to day and you don't actually feel like you're in survival mode, you don't actually feel like there's anything wrong, your body disagrees. Okay. And the truth about perfectionism is that it has everything to do with safety and not a lot to do with standards. Okay. Because if we were to like really take a look at your life and all the different things that you're doing in your life, I would bet that a lot of people who say that they're perfectionists aren't necessarily perfectionists in every single thing that they do in their life. They're only perfectionists about the things that they're avoiding in their life. And that's like a ouch thing to confront, because it's like you're only perfectionist towards the things that mean a lot to you. So for example, if you're afraid of putting yourself out there, if you're afraid of being perceived, if you're afraid of being judged or rejected or receiving criticism, there's a lot of fear-based energy that is like the underlining of perfectionism. So if you are experiencing any of that, you have to look, am I a perfectionist and do I hold these standards to every single thing in my life? And the answer is probably not. You know, there's a many things. Like if I were to go to your bathroom, like, did you clean your bathroom as a perfectionist? Like, am I gonna, you know, like, did you put away your clothes like a perfectionist? Did you do this project like a perfectionist? The answer is probably no. You probably didn't do it to this like high standard, this high level of standard that you hold yourself only towards the things that you really give a shit about. Okay. And that's important for you to acknowledge, because that actually helps you widen your awareness about how perfectionism is manifesting in your life. Like, is this an actual thing, or are you experiencing perfectionistic qualities and perfectionistic tendencies because at the core of it, you don't feel safe to do the things that you want, to say the things that you want, to express yourself in the way that you want. And there is a fundamental story of safety that is really at play here. Okay. So now the question of like emotional intelligence and mental intelligence start to, interweave here, because a lot of our perfectionism stories is like up here. And up here, that you can just do the thing, and up here, like you planned enough, and then you organized enough, and you did all the different things. Up here, and so the mental intelligence is not really the problem. The problem here is the physical safety is actually from your emotional intelligence and how it is that you can manage the emotion of discomfort. And that's like a yucky emotion to like handle, right? Because it's like, I don't want to feel discomfort, so I'm going to go towards my survival states. I'm going to either fight my discomfort, I'm going to fly away from my discomfort, or I'm going to let it overtake me to the point where I'm like, I'm frozen, so I don't know what to do. So this is where you'll experience procrastination. This is where you'll experience, not doing the things that you want to get done. This is where you'll pretend like now is not the right time. So all of these survival modes, perfectionism actually correlates directly to each of these things, okay? And I'll break it down for you because we're talking about discomfort. So when you're running away from discomfort, well, actually, let me step back. When you are fighting discomfort, it basically says like, no, I'm just somebody who has high standards. So I want to make sure that I'm doing it this way. And you feel very defensive about it. Like you feel very defensive about, like arguing and giving evidence and giving proof for why you're doing what you're doing is the right thing, right? Like you're trying to give evidence for your defensiveness. Like, and there's like a fire energy to defense, right? Like even as I'm speaking, I'm like, my chest is hot, like my neck is hot. There's like a fire, agitation, aggravation energy about it. And so that's how perfectionism, when you're in your fight mode, shows up. Now, if you are in your flight mode, you're going to avoid like literally anything that has to do with, the project or the idea or anything, because you're just running away from it. The idea just feels so big and it's so heavy. And so this oftentimes manifests as imposter syndrome. Okay. So to run away from it, it's like, I'm not good enough to do that. I'm just a beginner. I'm not good enough as I am. So you start to self-doubt. You start to believe the stories. You start to create the narratives that says, how am I going to do any of this? So there's a lot of dissociation when you're running away, so you're scrolling a lot, you're comparing yourself a lot, you're consuming a lot of information that you're not applying. There's that kind of energy, right? And so that is the fight, that's the flight. But then when you freeze in terms of perfectionism, when your body's totally in a freeze state, that's when you will procrastinate. Okay. So when you're frozen, you're going to say, my mind knows the information, but my body feels different. I see all the certifications that I've collected and that I am qualified, but I'm having a hard time believing that in my body. I know I have this experience, but I feel like I need to get more. So the freeze is like, I'm paralyzed to be able to make any kind of reasonable step. Okay. And the extreme portion of paralysis is like, I can't even think about this topic. I can't even look about this I can't even look at this project. I can't open that email. I cannot have the conversation. I cannot even like think the loop in my head. I can't even think that loop in my head because it is like scaring me. It is scaring me so much to the point where I don't really know what to do at all. I can't get rid of it. I can't do the healing work of it. I just can't. Okay. And that is your body from a nervous system perspective. It is a frozen state. Okay. Now you might be functional in other ways. It's not like you can't do anything in your entire life. Sometimes that manifests that way too. Of course it does. But sometimes it's like, yeah, you're fine at work and you're fine over here. You're fine with your family. You're fine with your friends, But this thing that you're avoiding, that is the thing. It's like, I can do everything else except that, right? Like I can think about anything else except this. I can solve everybody's problem except my own, right? Let me know if you resonate with any of that. So basically, the point that I'm trying to make to you is healing perfectionism isn't a blueprint. It's really about navigating the safety of your particular nervous system. So if you're somebody who goes into flight, you're going to approach this in a completely different way than somebody who's shut down. And somebody who's shut down is going to completely approach it in a different way than somebody who is frozen or who's running away or who's, the behavior actually matters because perfectionism manifests for us in many different ways, right? So sometimes it's over overdoing. That's your nervous system in hyperarousal, where you're just like overdoing, taking too much action and not really necessarily the right action. You're just like trying to prove to yourself that you're taking action, but it's like, okay, but like none of those actions had anything to do with this. It had to do with something adjacently, but you're like, you're trying to cover up, like taking lots of action for the inaction towards this one thing. And that can be a trap, right? Because you feel busy, you know, you set aside your 2-hour block or your 1-hour block and you're like, I'm working on this, I'm doing the thing. Look, I crossed off 10 things on my list. Like, good job. But it was for a different project. It wasn't for this, right? And that's the reality that is the mist, the fog that we're trying to clear up in terms of perfectionism, the nervous system, okay? So in the chat, you're saying self-doubt, believing the inner critic, definitely freeze and procrastinate. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, and so like, and one of the words that you dropped here, style 1111369, is that you said self-sabotage, right? And one of the things is like, it's beautiful that you can recognize that word for yourself, because oftentimes when we're in this pattern of disrupting our lives like this, we don't actually know that we're doing it, right? Like, for example, this example that I just gave you, if you have a list of shit that you're doing over here that had nothing to do with your stuff over here, you might not understand that this is a self-sabotaging behavior. That like by you doing something different and utilizing your time, energy, attention towards something else is actually taking away from the thing that you actually want to do, right? And so you might not actually notice that, because on paper, you're busy. On paper, you're checking off things. On paper, it looks like you're doing activity. But because you're not doing activity towards this thing, it's just adjacently just a little bit over here, you might not recognize that it's self-sabotage. So it's beautiful if you have that awareness, because now you get to do something with that awareness. You get to say like, oh shit, am I just wasting my time here? Am I focusing on the right thing, or am I focusing on the wrong thing? Am I focusing on the wrong thing because it's actually a coping mechanism? Okay? Perfection in itself is a coping mechanism to avoid discomfort. Right? Like, it's like, if I pretend like I'm busy, if I'm doing all these different things and I feel like I'm busy and I'm like trying to convince myself that I am, because mentally I'm seeing all these things, but emotionally I understand that I am just coping, avoiding feeling the discomfort of doing a thing that actually just feels really big. You know, and it just feels like uncomfortable to take action towards those things. It feels very, it feels confronting. And that's a word that I'm always using towards my mentees and my clients. I'm like, things are confronting, you know, because your body responds to confrontation. And what do you do on a nervous system perspective when you are confronted with something that's uncomfortable? You run away, you fight, or you freeze. Right? So it's not anything new. Your body performs in a predictable pattern. It's just what it is. And by pattern, the definition of a pattern is predictable, repetitive, and predictable and repetitive. I'll stick to those words. Like that's what it is. It's a predictability. So now if you already start to notice like, I do this, right? Or, oh shit, I'm only avoiding this, but I'm not avoiding these different things. And I tend to run away, and I tend to avoid, and I tend to, do behaviors of dissociation by putting my attention towards something else that I care less about, because I don't actually care if that fails or not. Like, I don't really have like an emotional attachment to that. But this feels like it has to be self-important. Like, this feels like it has to have this like big meaning, and it has to be right, and it has to be this. And I was actually experiencing this for myself like a couple of weeks ago. So I produce music, and a couple of weeks ago I found myself in this like heavy frozen state where I'm not like doing anything with music, and I wanted to be. Like, I wanted to make this particular thing, and like it was weeks and weeks and weeks, and I was like, why can't I do anything, because like I'm always lecturing people about take a small step or do this and that. Like, I'm like, I understand that mentally, right? But my physical body had this big resistance, because once I unpacked it, I was like, oh, I feel like it has to be so self-important, because I cared about it so much And I feel like I had to like make something that like meant something, right? Or like it had to be like a and it's like nobody told me that. Nobody pointed like, hey, you should make that. Like literally nobody said that. This is like a self projected like thing that I gave to myself. And I was like, oh, once I recognized it, I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And then you might have seen me on Instagram. I'm doing like a 30-day music production challenge where I'm producing music like every single day for an hour. I'm making one song in 1 hour, and it's like start, finish, go, and then that's it. Don't spend time doing this and that and fixing this. Da, 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 da. That could be another round. But for me, it was just like acknowledging I'm in the self-importance energy. And when I recognized that, I could have like disappointment and shame and frustration, but I was really happy to discover that. I was like, oh, I was really happy to be like, why does it feel so self-important, you know? And then when I unpack that, I'm like, okay, I understand where it's coming from, but this is the action I'm going to take to actually do the thing that I want, okay? Because most of our projections of our perfectionism is like so self-projected. You know, it's like, it's so self-projected. Like you believe that somebody's expecting you to be perfect. Like what a weird self-important thing to believe about yourself. You know, it's like everybody's sitting here like criticizing you or like making sure that you did this thing, or if you didn't, they're like, ha ha, stupid bitch. Like nobody cares enough, you know, like literally nobody cares enough. They're worried about their own shit. They're worried about their own life. They're worried about their own projection, their own self-experience, everybody's in their like own narrow channel of their own shit, you know? And like the more that you understand that like literally no one gives a shit, the more abundant you can become and more energetically aligned to your dreams and your goals and your projects that you can become. Because it's like, okay, now that I made a bunch of songs and one song a day, 1 hour a day, right? Now that I made a bunch of stuff, some of it was good, some of it wasn't. It's like, oh, nothing broke. You know, like nothing broke, nothing fixed, nothing broke. You know, like I'm just a better producer now. I have better skill sets. I have better listening. I have better tools. I'm discovering more of my style and more of these things, but I would never be able to do that had I not like actually like sat down and do, you know? And it's like, nobody cares about your process. Literally nobody but you care about your process. And the perfectionist has to understand that. Okay. So I could throw around a bunch of clinical language at you. I'm a researcher by training, but that's not the emotional intelligence that you have to build in order to create physical safety. Physical safety, emotional intelligence builds physical safety that allows you to heal through perfectionism from a nervous system perspective. Okay, folks. All right. So let me read some of these comments. And I also want to mention that our Glow Up workshop is September 5th. Okay. We're in Virgo season. It's a very blunt season. It's also a very grounded season. It's a very cut your shit kind of season. And it's all about coming into the energy, the frequency of who it is that you are at the core of you and getting over all the extra noise that's around it. Okay, so Glow Up is a free workshop. There's limited free tickets. So if you use the code GLOW UP, the link is in my bio. You can attend for free September 5th, 6 to 8 p.m. Central Time. I hope you come. But Stella says, I want to get to that point where I know no one gives a shit. More so, I want to get to the point where I don't care what people think. Yeah. And honestly, it's not that, and I'll share with you like from where I am in like my own awareness and healing, right? Like, cause I can't tell you something I don't know. But I don't know if you ever don't care at all what people think. You know, I think there's still like a residue of like caring what people think, you know? And there's a difference between not giving a shit at all and learning to give a shit about the right things. And these are two different energies, okay? Right? Like you should give a shit about many things, but pick the right things to give a shit about, right? And then it's like, there's certain things, it's like a useless expenditure of your energy. It's like, why are you caring about this, and the other thing? And so from 8th grade, how long ago was 8th grade? You know, like, and so from this school and that thing and this school and that coworker. It's like those things, less shits and more shits into the category of what you care about. And for me, I heavily give a shit And that's why I'm able to do anything that I do, right? Like to write a book or to, have a podcast or to mentor students and have clients and, be a mentor to people. I have to give a shit. I have to give a shit, but I give a shit about the right things. And so it's like translating your energy, right? It's like that thing that we just talked about before. It's like if you're giving a shit, but it's on this category of stuff, then translate it to this that gives you a little bit more extra freedom to, to figure out where the opinion is important, figuring out the discernment of whose opinion is important and when, because sometimes certain people's opinions are important in certain categories, but not towards everything. So for example, like you might value your business mentor's opinion about something or their knowledge or expertise about something, but maybe you don't take like exercise opinions from them. You listen to somebody else who has like a different expertise. So it's like, listen to this from them, but not this from them. Listen to that from. So it's like building up that discernment for yourself as well. All right. So I'm about to head off, but if you have any questions about perfectionism or nervous system, like this is my jam. I'm talking always about people pleasing and overthinking and all of these different, primarily impacting women and heavily more so impacting women of color and folks from underrepresented communities. So it is a big conversation that's important to like still have dialogue about. And it's important for me, the way that I present it is not to like make it so clinical, even though there is like clinical research about nervous system and clinical research about perfectionism. It's also important to approach it from like a practicality of like, don't do this. You know what I mean? Like you have this awareness and then this is the practical step to actually help you, be in the energy of who it is that you are at the core of yourself. Yeah. All right. Come to Glow Up Workshop September 5th and I will see you soon.